The dust swirled across the open plain as Willow O'Connor watched in horror as a sea of wild mustangs thundered toward her, their hooves pounding the earth like 1,000 drums. Her heart froze in her chest, her feet rooted to the ground as if the very soil of the Missouri frontier had claimed her as its own. Death approached on 100 legs, and all she could do was stare, mesmerized by its terrible beauty. The year was 1875, and the frontier of Clifton Hill was no place for the faint of heart. Willow had come west from Boston after her parents' passing, determined to make a new life on the land her uncle had left her. She had been collecting wildflowers near the creek bed when the distant rumble caught her attention, but by the time she'd understood what was happening, escape seemed impossible. A gunshot cracked through the air, then another. From somewhere to her left, a rider appeared on a gleaming chestnut stallion, racing parallel to the stampede. His hat was pulled low, but she could see determination etched into his sun-weathered face as he fired his revolver skyward again. The lead horses veered slightly, and the mysterious rider expertly maneuvered his mount, continuing to fire until the entire herd began to turn away from Willow's frozen form. As the dust settled and the thunder of hooves faded into the distance, Willow's legs finally gave way. She sank to the ground, her fingers clutching at the prairie grass, the wildflowers she'd gathered scattered around her. "Madam, you all right?" The voice was deep, tinged with concern. Willow looked up, squinting against the afternoon sun to see her rescuer dismounting in one fluid motion. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face partially hidden beneath the shadow of his Stetson. I think so," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He approached cautiously, as if afraid she might bolt like the wild horses he'd just diverted. When he reached her, he knelt down, and Willow found herself looking into the clearest blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a face that was handsome despite the thin scar that ran along his jawline. "Name's Colton Blackwood," he said, offering his hand. "Most folks just call me Cole." "Willow O'Connor," she replied, taking his calloused hand and allowing him to help her to her feet. "I owe you my life, Mr. Blackwood." A half-smile tugged at his lips. "Just Cole, madam, and anyone would have done the same," but they both knew that wasn't true. Few men could have turned a stampede the way he had, with such skill and precision. As she brushed the dust from her skirts, Willow studied him more carefully. His clothes were worn but well kept, his gun belt settled comfortably against his hips as if it were part of him. "You're new to these parts," he observed, not a question but a statement. "Yes. My Uncle Jeremiah O'Connor passed last winter. I've come to claim his property." Something flickered in Cole's eyes. "Jeremiah was your kin. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good man. You knew him." Cole nodded, leading his horse closer. Everyone knew Jeremiah, stubborn as they come but fair. His place is about 3 miles east of here. He glanced at the setting sun. "It'll be dark soon, not safe for you to be walking back alone." "I have my wagon," Willow said, gesturing toward a small rise. "It's just over that hill." Cole seemed to consider this for a moment. "I'll ride with you if you don't mind the company. These lands can be unpredictable after dark." Something in his tone suggested he wasn't just talking about wild animals or roaming mustangs. Willow hesitated only briefly, before nodding her acceptance. This man had just saved her life, after all, and there was something in those blue eyes that made her believe she could trust him. As they walked toward her wagon, Cole kept a respectful distance, but Willow felt his gaze on her more than once. She wondered what he saw, a city woman out of her element, perhaps. Her practical traveling dress had seemed rugged in Boston, but here in the frontier, she felt absurdly out of place. "What brings a man like you to these parts, Mr. Blackwood Cole?" she asked, breaking the silence. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "I go where I'm needed. Right now, that's here." It wasn't really an answer, but Willow sensed there was more to his story than he was willing to share with a stranger. The set of his shoulders spoke of burdens carried too long, and the wariness in his eyes told of a man who'd seen his share of troubles. When they reached her wagon, Cole insisted on checking the horses before they set off. His hands moved with gentle confidence as he examined the animals and tack. "These are good stock," he commented, running a hand down one of the mare's flanks. "But they're city horses. They'll need time to adjust to life out here." "Like their owner," Willow said with a small smile. Cole's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding. "The frontier changes a person," he said quietly. "Sometimes for better, sometimes not. Depends on what you're made of inside." He helped her up onto the wagon seat before mounting his own horse. "I reckon you've got enough steel in your spine to make it, Miss O'Connor." As they traveled toward her uncle's property, the setting sun painted the prairie in hues of gold and crimson. Willow found herself stealing glances at her silent companion. There was a story there, one written in the lines around his eyes, in the way he constantly scanned the horizon, in the practiced ease with which he carried his weapon. "Have you been in Clifton Hill long?" she ventured. "Long enough to know its secrets," Cole replied cryptically. Then, perhaps sensing her frustration with his vague answers, he added, "About 6 months. I came looking for work after the cattle drive slowed down." "And did you find it? Work, I mean." A shadow passed over his face. "Of a sort. I helped the marshal keep order when needed, do some scouting for the army. Odd jobs here and there." Before Willow could inquire further, Cole suddenly raised his hand, signaling for silence. His entire demeanor changed in an instant, alert, tense, listening. He moved his horse closer to her wagon. "Keep driving," he said quietly. "Natural pace, don't look around." Fear clutched at Willow's heart. "What is it?" "Just keep moving," he instructed, his voice low and firm. "There's a bend in the road ahead. Once we're around it, we'll pick up speed." Willow's hands tightened on the reins as she fought to maintain her composure. She focused on the road ahead, acutely aware of every sound: the creak of the wagon wheels, the rhythmic breathing of her horses, the soft thud of Cole's mount's hooves beside her. They rounded the bend, and Cole immediately urged her to snap the reins. "Now, fast as you can without breaking the wagon." Willow didn't hesitate. She urged her horses forward, and the wagon lurched as they broke into a trot, then a canter. Cole rode alongside, one hand resting on his holstered pistol. "What's happening?" Willow demanded, her voice steady despite her fear. "Riders following us," Cole explained tersely. "Could be nothing, could be trouble. Not taking chances with Jeremiah's niece." They maintained their pace for nearly a mile before Cole finally signaled for her to slow. As the wagon settled back into a more comfortable speed, he relaxed slightly, though his eyes continued to scan their surroundings. "I think we're clear," he said after a moment. "Probably just travelers heading the same way, but out here it pays to be cautious." "Is it always this dangerous?" Willow asked, her heart still racing. Cole's expression softened slightly. "Not always, but these are unsettled times. The war's been over for years, but not everyone's made peace with it, and there are always those who prey on others, thinking the law's too stretched thin to catch them." "And is it? Too stretched thin?" Cole's lips curved in a grim smile. "Let's just say Marshal Jenkins appreciates all the help he can get." The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time they approached a weathered wooden sign that read O'Connor. Beyond it lay a modest but well-built cabin, a barn, and several outbuildings, all situated on a gentle rise that overlooked a creek. "Home sweet home," Cole said, gesturing toward the property. Jeremiah built most of it himself. He was mighty proud of this place. Willow's throat tightened with emotion as she took in her inheritance. Her uncle had been something of a mystery, her mother's older brother, who'd headed west as a young man and rarely returned east. His occasional letters had painted a picture of frontier life that had seemed like fiction to a city girl like herself. Now, looking at the homestead bathed in twilight, she felt a strange connection to this man she'd barely known. Cole dismounted and helped her down from the wagon. For a moment, his hands lingered at her waist, and Willow was acutely aware of how close they stood. Then, as if catching himself, he stepped back and cleared his throat. "I should check the property," he said gruffly. "Make sure everything's secure before I leave you." "Thank you," Willow replied, suddenly reluctant for him to go. The prospect of spending her first night alone in this strange place was daunting. As if reading her thoughts, Cole added, "I can stay in the barn tonight if you'd feel safer. No impropriety intended, just frontier hospitality." Willow hesitated, weighing propriety against practicality. Back in Boston, even the suggestion would have been scandalous, but this wasn't Boston, and Colton Blackwood had already proven himself honorable. "I would appreciate that," she finally said, "at least until I get my bearings." Cole nodded, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. "Let's get your horses tended to, then. I'll show you around the place." Together they unhitched the team and led them to the barn, where Cole efficiently helped her care for the animals. His movements were practiced and gentle, and Willow found herself wondering what his story was, how a man who handled horses with such tenderness could also turn a stampede with calm precision. "You're good with them," she observed as he stroked one mare's nose. "Animals are simpler than people," he replied. "They don't lie, don't hold grudges. They know who means them harm and who doesn't." "And what about you, Colton Blackwood? What do you mean?" He looked up, surprised by her directness. In the lantern light, his blue eyes seemed to hold shadows deeper than the night outside. "I mean to keep my promises, Miss O'Connor. That's all any man can do." With the horses settled, Cole led her to the cabin. He lit a lantern before pushing open the door, revealing a simple but comfortable interior. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while a sturdy table and chairs occupied the center of the main room. Through a doorway, Willow glimpsed a bedroom with a neatly made bed. "Looks like Mrs. Holly's came by to ready the place," Cole said, noting her surprise at the cabin's condition. "She was a friend of your uncle's, probably left some food in the pantry too." Sure enough, the small pantry contained basic provisions: flour, coffee, beans, salt pork, and even some preserved fruits. Enough to last her a few days until she could get to town for proper supplies. Cole built a fire in the fireplace, his movements efficient and practiced. Once it was crackling merrily, he straightened and turned to her. "I'll leave you to settle in," he said. "I'll be in the barn if you need anything. Just call out." Willow wanted to thank him again, but found herself suddenly tongue-tied. This man, a stranger hours ago, had saved her life, escorted her safely home, and now stood in her cabin like some frontier guardian angel. It seemed surreal. "I don't know how to repay your kindness," she finally managed. Cole's expression softened slightly. "No need. Jeremiah would have wanted someone looking out for you. Get some rest, Miss O'Connor. Tomorrow will be a long day." With that, he tipped his hat and slipped out into the night, leaving Willow alone with her thoughts in a cabin that smelled of pine and wood smoke. Sleep eluded her that night, despite her exhaustion. The unfamiliar sounds of the frontier, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of wind through the tall grass, the occasional creak of the cabin settling kept her alert and wary. Several times she rose from bed to check that the door was still securely bolted, finding comfort in the knowledge that Cole was just a shout away. Dawn broke with a brilliance that stole her breath. Willow stood at the cabin door, watching as the sun painted the prairie in shades of gold and amber. The beauty of it made her chest ache, this wild, untamed land that was now her home. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the barn, where Cole emerged leading his horse. He'd clearly been up for some time, and Willow felt a flush of embarrassment at having slept while he worked. "Good morning," she called, stepping out onto the porch. Cole looked up, and for a moment, a genuine smile transformed his face. It was gone almost immediately, replaced by his usual reserved expression, but Willow had seen it, a glimpse of the man beneath the wary exterior. "Morning," he replied, approaching the cabin. "Thought I'd check your water situation. The well's good, but the pump might need some work." "You don't need to do that," Willow protested, though she was secretly grateful. She'd had no idea where to start with maintaining a homestead. Cole shrugged. "Needs doing. Might as well be me." As the morning progressed, Willow discovered that Cole wasn't a man of idle promises. He checked and repaired the pump, inspected the roof for leaks, and reinforced a loose shutter. All the while, he explained what he was doing, teaching her without making her feel ignorant. "Winter's harsh out here," he told her as they sat on the porch steps during a brief rest. "You'll need to stock up on firewood, get the root cellar filled, maybe hire someone to help with the heavy work." "I was planning to manage on my own," Willow admitted. "My funds are limited." Cole nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Most folks help each other out here, trade work, share resources. It's the only way to survive." "And who helps you, Cole?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He stared out at the horizon, something distant in his gaze. "I manage." By midday, Willow insisted on preparing a meal to thank him for his help. She was no accomplished cook, but she managed a passable stew with the provisions Mrs. Hollies had left. They ate at the table, the silence between them growing more comfortable. "Tell me about my uncle," Willow said as they finished their meal. "I barely knew him." Cole considered her request, absently turning his coffee cup in his hands. "Jeremiah was complicated. Came west with nothing but determination. Built this place from scratch. Had his share of troubles, but he was respected, fair in his dealings, generous to those in need. Did he have friends? Was he happy? He wasn't a solitary man, if that's what you're asking. Mrs. Hollies was sweet on him for years, though I don't think anything came of it. He played cards with the marshal every Sunday, had a way with horses that folks admired." Cole paused. "As for happy, I think he found contentment. That's more than most get." Willow absorbed this, trying to reconcile the uncle she remembered, a gruff, intimidating figure on his rare visits east, with the man Cole described. "How did he die?" she asked softly. The letter informing her of her inheritance had been vague about the circumstances. Something flickered in Cole's eyes, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Hunting accident officially. Found at the bottom of a ravine about 10 miles north of here." "Officially?" Willow picked up on his careful phrasing. "What does that mean?" Cole set down his cup with deliberate care. "It means Jeremiah O'Connor knew these lands better than anyone. It means he wasn't the type to misjudge a step or take unnecessary risks." His eyes met hers directly. "But sometimes accidents happen even to careful men." There was a message beneath his words, one Willow wasn't sure she was ready to decipher. Before she could press further, the sound of approaching horses captured their attention. Cole was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to his gun as he strode to the window. Willow watched as his posture relaxed slightly, though his hand remained near his weapon. "Visitors," he said, glancing back at her. "Mrs. Hollies and her son Thomas." Willow smoothed her skirts and followed Cole onto the porch as a wagon pulled up in front of the cabin. A plump, gray-haired woman in practical calico climbed down with the assistance of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to her around the eyes. "Well now," the woman called cheerfully, "if it isn't Colton Blackwood making himself useful as usual, and you must be Jeremiah's niece." "Willow O'Connor," Willow confirmed, stepping forward to greet her visitors. "You must be Mrs. Hollies. I understand I have you to thank for preparing the cabin." Martha Hollies waved away the gratitude as she approached, enveloping Willow in a surprisingly strong embrace. "Least I could do for Jeremiah's kin. This here's my boy, Thomas." Thomas Hollies tipped his hat, his smile friendly but reserved. "Madam, we brought some proper supplies," Martha continued, gesturing to the wagon laden with crates. "Figured you might need more than what I left." City folk usually don't realize how much preparation frontier living takes. Willow felt a flush of embarrassment at being so easily identified as an outsider, but Martha's tone held no judgment, only practical concern. "That's incredibly kind of you," she said. "Please, come inside. I've just made coffee." As Thomas began unloading supplies, Cole stepped forward to help, the two men exchanging nods of recognition. Willow led Martha into the cabin, aware that her guest was subtly assessing everything from the cleanliness of the floor to the way the curtains hung. "You'll do fine here," Martha declared suddenly, settling herself at the table. "Got the same look in your eye as your uncle, determined. That's what you need out here more than anything." "I'm not sure determination is enough," Willow admitted, pouring coffee into the cup Cole had vacated. "There's so much I don't know." Martha patted her hand. "Knowledge comes with time. It's spirit that sees you through when the blizzards hit or the crops fail." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And I see you've already got Cole Blackwood lending a hand. That's fortune smiling on you right there." Willow felt heat rising to her cheeks. "Mr. Blackwood happened to be in the right place at the right time yesterday. He's been kind enough to help me get settled." Martha's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. "Cole doesn't happen to be anywhere, child. Man moves with purpose, always has. If he's helping you, it's because he's chosen to." Before Willow could respond to this intriguing observation, the door opened and Cole and Thomas entered carrying crates of supplies. "Where do you want these, Miss O'Connor?" Thomas asked. "The pantry, please, and call me Willow." As the men arranged the supplies, Martha leaned closer. "We're having a social at the church this Sunday. Whole town will be there. Good chance for you to meet your neighbors." "I'd like that," Willow said, genuinely pleased at the invitation. She'd worried about being isolated, an outsider in a close-knit community. "Cole, you'll bring Miss O'Connor to the social, won't you?" Martha called across the room, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Cole straightened, shooting Martha a look that suggested this wasn't the first time she tried to manage his affairs. "Miss O'Connor can make her own decisions about escorts." "Of course she can," Martha agreed smoothly. "But seeing as you're already looking out for her property, it would be practical." Thomas rolled his eyes at his mother's transparent matchmaking. "Ma, leave the man be. Miss O'Connor barely knows him." "He saved my life yesterday," Willow found herself saying. "A herd of wild horses was stampeding right toward me. Mr. Blackwood fired his gun and turned them away just in time." Martha's eyebrows shot up. "Did he now? Well, that's quite the introduction." She eyed Cole with renewed interest. "Always knew you had a flair for dramatic timing." Cole ignored the teasing, focusing instead on arranging the last of the supplies. "The mustangs have been restless lately, more of them than usual in the valley. Army's been pushing them this way," Thomas explained to Willow. "They're clearing land for the new railroad spur line." "Pushing them right onto settled lands," Martha added with disapproval. "Causing no end of trouble for folks with crops and livestock." Willow frowned. That seems short-sighted. Couldn't they find another route? The three locals exchanged glances that spoke volumes about Eastern naivety. It was Cole who finally responded, his tone gentle but firm. Progress doesn't much care about what's sensible, Miss O'Connor, just what's profitable. The conversation shifted to more practical matters, advice about which merchants in town were fair, which doctor to call if she fell ill, which neighbors might be willing to help with heavy work in exchange for home-cooked meals. Willow absorbed it all, grateful for the guidance yet increasingly aware of how unprepared she truly was for frontier life. As the afternoon waned, Martha and Thomas prepared to leave. Martha embraced Willow again, this time whispering in her ear, "You come by our place anytime you need a woman's counsel. We're just over the East Ridge, can't miss it." Thomas loaded the last empty crate onto their wagon and tipped his hat to Willow. "If you need help with anything heavy, Miss O'Connor, just send word. Happy to lend a hand." As they pulled away, Willow noticed Cole watching their departure with an unreadable expression. "They seem kind," she ventured. Cole nodded. "Salt of the earth." Martha's got her nose in everyone's business, but her heart's in the right place. "And what about you, Cole?" Willow asked, emboldened by the day's camaraderie. "Where do you fit in Clifton Hill?" He turned to her, the setting sun casting long shadows across his face. Not really. I keep to myself, help when needed." "That sounds lonely." Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her directness. "Lonely's safer sometimes." Before she could question this cryptic response, he glanced at the horizon. "It'll be dark soon. I should get going if I'm going to make it back to town before nightfall." Disappointment flooded through Willow, though she tried to mask it. Of course he wouldn't stay another night. He'd done more than enough already. Of course. "Thank you for everything, truly. I don't know what I would have done without your help." Cole hesitated, then said, "About Sunday's social. If you'd like an escort, I'd be happy to oblige. Save you having to navigate the introductions alone." Willow's heart quickened at the unexpected offer. "I'd like that very much." He nodded once, then moved toward the barn to retrieve his horse. Willow followed, watching as he efficiently saddled the chestnut stallion. "What's his name?" she asked, gesturing to the magnificent animal. "Ranger," Cole replied, something softening in his expression as he patted the horse's neck. "Been with me through thick and thin." As he mounted, Cole looked down at Willow standing in the barn doorway. For a moment neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. "Keep your doors locked," he finally said. "If you need anything before Sunday, Mrs. Hollis knows how to find me." "I'll be fine," Willow assured him, though part of her wished he would stay. "Thank you again, Cole." He tipped his hat, then turned his horse toward town. Willow watched until horse and rider disappeared over the ridge, then slowly made her way back to the cabin that was now her home. The next few days passed in a blur of activity, as Willow familiarized herself with the property and its routines. She discovered her uncle's journal in a desk drawer, its pages filled with observations about weather patterns, crop yields, and occasional philosophical musings. Reading it gave her insight into the man he'd been and practical knowledge about the land she now owned. She also explored the outbuildings, finding tools, supplies, and even a small loom in one of them. In the barn, besides the stalls for her wagon horses, she found evidence that her uncle had indeed worked with wild horses' specialized equipment, a reinforced corral, and detailed notes on training methods. On Friday, Willow decided to venture into town for additional supplies. The trip was uneventful, though she found herself constantly scanning the horizon, half hoping to see a familiar rider on a chestnut horse. Clifton Hill proved to be a modest frontier town, a single main street lined with essential businesses, a church, and a schoolhouse. The townspeople were polite but reserved, clearly curious about Jeremiah's niece from back east. At the general store, the proprietor, a balding man named Mr. Simmons, was especially helpful, advising her on what supplies would keep best and even offering to deliver the heavier items to her property. "No need for a lady to strain herself," he insisted. "My boy can bring them out tomorrow." "That's very kind," Willow replied, genuinely grateful. "I'm still learning what's practical out here." Mr. Simmons nodded sagely. "Takes time to adjust. Your uncle was the same way when he first arrived. City manners, city expectations. Frontier soon taught him differently." As Willow was completing her purchases, the door opened and a hush fell over the other customers. She turned to see a tall, distinguished man in a black coat entering the store. His silver hair and mustache contrasted sharply with eyes as dark and hard as obsidian. "Miss O'Connor," Mr. Simmons said, his jovial tone slightly strained, "may I introduce Mr. Harrison Blake? Mr. Blake owns the bank and most of the businesses in town." Blake approached, his smile not quite reaching those cold eyes. "Miss O'Connor. A pleasure to finally meet Jeremiah's niece. My condolences on your loss." "Thank you, Mr. Blake," Willow replied, instinctively wary though she couldn't explain why. "It's a pleasure to meet you as well." Blake studied her with unsettling intensity. "I hope you're finding everything satisfactory at your uncle's property. It's quite isolated out there for a young woman alone." "I'm managing well, thank you." "I'm sure you are," Blake said smoothly. "However, should you find the responsibilities overwhelming, please know that I would be interested in purchasing the property. I could offer a very fair price, enough for you to return east in comfort." Willow blinked, taken aback by the directness of the offer. "That's very considerate, Mr. Blake, but I have no intention of selling. The land is my home now." Something hardened in Blake's expression, though his polite smile remained fixed. "Of course. Just know the offer stands should you change your mind." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss O'Connor." As Blake strode from the store, the atmosphere lightened noticeably. Mr. Simmons busied himself with Willow's purchases, avoiding her questioning gaze. "Is Mr. Blake always so direct in his business dealings?" she asked carefully. Mr. Simmons glanced around before leaning closer. "Mr. Blake has been trying to buy your uncle's land for years. Something about water rights and access to the eastern valleys. Jeremiah wouldn't sell at any price." He hesitated. "Some folks thought there might be more to it than that, but Jeremiah kept his own counsel." A chill ran down Willow's spine as she recalled Cole's careful words about her uncle's death. "What do you mean by more to it?" The storekeeper straightened, clearly regretting his loose tongue. "Just frontier gossip, Miss O'Connor. Pay it no mind. Your uncle was respected, and that's what matters." Willow left the store with her purchases and more questions than answers. As she loaded her wagon, she felt eyes on her and looked up to see Blake watching from the doorway of the bank across the street. He nodded once, then disappeared inside. The encounter left her unsettled, a feeling that persisted as she drove back to her property. Blake's interest in her uncle's land seemed excessive, and the timing of his offer before she'd even properly settled struck her as predatory. When she arrived home, Willow was surprised to find Cole's horse tethered outside her barn. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by self-consciousness as she realized how disheveled she must look after her trip to town. Cole emerged from the barn as she pulled up, his expression uncharacteristically tense. "You went to town." It wasn't a question, and the edge in his voice caught her off guard. "Yes, I needed supplies." He approached the wagon, helping her down with firm hands. "You should have waited." "I would have gone with you." Willow bristled slightly at his tone. I'm perfectly capable of going to town on my own, Mr. Blackwood. I appreciate your concern, but did you speak with anyone? He interrupted, his blue eyes intense. Several people. Mr. Simmons at the store was particularly helpful, and I met Mr. Blake from the bank. She watched Cole's reaction carefully. His jaw tightened at the mention of Blake. What did he want? To buy my property, apparently. He seemed quite eager. Cole's expression darkened further. Blake's always eager when it comes to other people's land. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. You should be careful around him, Willow. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and despite the tension of the moment, it sent a curious warmth through her. Why are you here, Cole? She asked quietly. He hesitated, then gestured toward the barn. Found tracks this morning. Someone's been scouting your property, watching the place. Fear coiled in her stomach. Watching. Why would anyone? Could be nothing, Cole interrupted, though his tone suggested otherwise. Drifters pass through sometimes, looking for easy pickings, but with Blake making offers already. He shook his head. I don't like it. What should I do? Cole's expression softened slightly. Nothing different. Live your life, but keep your doors locked and… He hesitated. Would you mind if I stayed close by for a few days, just until I'm sure there's no threat? The prospect of having Cole nearby brought more relief than Willow cared to admit. Of course. The barn is at your disposal. Thank you. He glanced at her wagon. Let's get your supplies unloaded before dark. As they worked together, Willow told him about her trip to town, including the strange atmosphere when Blake had entered the store. Cole listened intently, asking occasional questions but offering little in return. Mr. Simmons mentioned something odd, she said as they carried the last of the supplies into the cabin. He said people thought there was more to it regarding Blake's interest in my uncle's land. Do you know what he meant? Cole set down a sack of flour and straightened, his expression guarded. Your uncle's property sits on the most reliable water source for miles. In drought years, it can mean the difference between survival and ruin for ranchers. And Blake is a rancher. Among other things, he owns the largest cattle operation in the county, plus the bank, the saloon, and half the businesses in town. That doesn't explain why my uncle wouldn't sell, Willow pressed. If it was just about water rights, surely they could have come to some arrangement. Cole studied her for a long moment, as if deciding how much to say. Your uncle discovered something on his property about 2 years ago, something that changed him. He became more cautious, started asking questions about land rights, mineral claims. Willow's heart quickened. What did he discover? I don't know for certain. He kept it close. Cole's eyes held hers. But whatever it was, it made Blake double his offers for the land, and it made your uncle start carrying a rifle even to check his fence lines. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Willow sank into a chair, trying to process what Cole was suggesting. You don't believe his death was an accident? It wasn't a question, and Cole didn't treat it as one. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his expression grave. Jeremiah O'Connor knew every inch of these lands. He wouldn't have fallen into a ravine by accident, not in clear weather. Cole's voice was low, measured. But the marshal found no evidence of foul play, and without that, there was nothing to investigate. Willow's mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. Why are you telling me this now? Because Blake made you an offer today, and because someone's been watching your property. Cole leaned forward, his gaze intense. Whatever your uncle found, Blake thinks it's still here, and he believes you don't know about it, which gives him an advantage. But I don't know about it, Willow protested. I have no idea what my uncle discovered. Exactly, so we need to find it before Blake does. Cole stood, pacing the small confines of the cabin. Your uncle would have kept records, notes about his discovery, somewhere safe but accessible. Willow thought of the journal she'd found. I've been reading his diary, but there's nothing unusual in it, just farming notes and personal reflections. Cole stopped pacing. May I see it? Willow retrieved the journal from her bedroom and handed it to Cole. He leafed through it carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. This is his everyday journal, he said after a moment, but knowing Jeremiah, he would have kept anything sensitive separate. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Did you find any other books, papers, anything hidden away? Willow shook her head. I haven't gone through everything yet. There's a trunk in his bedroom I haven't opened and some locked drawers in his desk. We should start there. Cole closed the journal and handed it back to her. With your permission, of course. The sun had set by the time they'd thoroughly searched the cabin. The trunk had contained only clothing and personal effects photographs, letters from Willow's mother, a pocket watch that had belonged to her grandfather. The locked desk drawers, once Cole had carefully picked them open, revealed nothing more incriminating than unpaid bills and correspondence with distant acquaintances. Nothing, Willow sighed, sitting back on her heels. Whatever Uncle Jeremiah discovered, he didn't record it here. Cole stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the darkening sky. He wouldn't have kept it in the house, too obvious. He turned to face her. Did you check the outbuildings, the barn? Not thoroughly, Willow admitted. I've been focusing on making the cabin livable. Tomorrow, then. We'll search the rest of the property. Cole's tone was firm, but his expression held a gentleness that made Willow's heart flutter. For now, you should rest. It's been a long day. As if on cue, exhaustion swept over her. The emotional strain of the day's revelations, combined with the physical labor of unloading supplies, left her barely able to keep her eyes open. You're right, she conceded. But what about you? Will you be comfortable in the barn? A half-smile touched Cole's lips. I've slept in worse places, believe me. I'll be fine. Willow walked him to the door, oddly reluctant to see him go even though he would be just yards away. At the threshold, Cole paused, his expression serious once more. Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me, understand? She nodded, touched by his concern yet unsettled by its implications. I understand. Good night, Willow. Good night, Cole. As promised, they began searching the outbuildings at first light. The smaller sheds yielded nothing unusual, just tools, supplies, and the everyday detritus of farm life. The barn, however, proved more interesting. Behind a false wall in what appeared to be a feed storage area, they discovered a small, hidden compartment. Your uncle was clever, Cole said, admiration in his voice as he carefully extracted a metal box from the hiding place. This would be easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. The box was locked, but the key hung on a nail just inside the compartment, hidden in plain sight for anyone who knew where to look. Inside, they found a leather-bound journal, several maps of the property with markings in red ink, and a small canvas pouch. Cole carefully opened the pouch and tipped its contents into his palm. Several rough stones tumbled out, unremarkable at first glance but with a curious weight to them. Gold, Cole said quietly, examining one of the stones. Low-grade ore, but definitely gold. Willow stared at the innocent-looking rocks, understanding dawning. There's gold on my property. Looks that way. Cole returned the stones to the pouch. Let's see what the journal says. Jeremiah's second journal was far more detailed than his everyday diary. In it, he meticulously documented his discovery of a vein of gold in the northern section of his property, near the ravine where he'd eventually been found dead. His notes described the extent of the find, modest but viable. His attempts to verify its value, confirmed by an assayer in Kansas City, and his growing suspicion that others had become aware of his discovery. The final entry, dated just a week before his death, sent a chill through Willow. Blake made another offer today, double what the property is worth for farming. He knows. Not sure how, but he knows. Refused him again. This find isn't just about money, it's my legacy for Willow. If anything happens to me, the deed transfer and all my notes are with Holly's. Blake won't get his hands on this land, not while I draw breath. Willow looked up from the journal, her hands trembling slightly. He knew he was in danger. Cole's expression was grim, and he prepared for it. The question is, did Blake ever find what he was looking for? The gold is still here, Willow said, gesturing to the maps. According to these, the vein runs through that northern ridge. But Blake doesn't know exactly where, Cole added, studying the maps. That's why he's still interested in buying the property, and why someone's been watching the place. The implications settled heavily between them. If Blake had been willing to eliminate her uncle for this gold, he wouldn't hesitate to do the same to her if she stood in his way. "What do I do?" Willow asked, her voice steady despite the fear churning inside her. Cole considered the question carefully. "First, we secure these documents somewhere safe. Then we act normal, go to the social tomorrow as planned, make it clear you're settling in for the long haul. And then we speak with Marshal Jenkins. With these notes and the ore samples, there might be enough to warrant an investigation into your uncle's death." Willow nodded, though doubt nagged at her. "Will the Marshal stand up to Blake? From what I've gathered, Blake practically owns the town." "Jenkins is a good man," Cole assured her. "Overworked and understaffed, but honest. He wasn't satisfied with the accident ruling, but his hands were tied without evidence." They carefully returned the journal, maps, and gold samples to the metal box, then hid it in a new location beneath a loose floorboard in Willow's bedroom. For the rest of the day, they maintained normal activities, working around the property as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and they both knew it. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Willow broached a question that had been bothering her. "Why are you helping me, Cole? Really?" He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, reflective. "I owed your uncle. When I first came to these parts, I was, in a bad way. Jeremiah gave me work, a place to stay, asked no questions about my past." He paused. "Not many men would do that for a stranger." "What happened?" "Before you came here, I mean." Cole's jaw tightened. "War changes a man. I came back different, did things I'm not proud of." His eyes met hers, unflinching. "I rode with some rough men for a while, got a reputation. Then something happened that made me see what I was becoming." "What was that?" "I was supposed to help run some farmers off their land, intimidation tactics for a man not unlike Blake. But when we got there..." He shook his head. "There were children, Willow, families just trying to survive. I couldn't do it. Walked away, which didn't sit well with my associates." Willow understood what he wasn't saying, that he'd made enemies, powerful ones, that he'd been running when he'd found sanctuary with her uncle. "And now," she asked softly, "are you still running?" Cole's gaze returned to the horizon. "Not for a while now. Clifton Hill's as close to home as I've had since the war." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep inside her. This man, who carried himself with such careful self-sufficiency, was allowing her to see beyond his guarded exterior. "Thank you," she said simply, "for telling me. For everything." His only response was a slight nod, but when his hand found hers on the porch step between them, his grip was warm and sure. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell, each lost in their own thoughts, yet somehow more connected than before. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the church social. Willow took extra care with her appearance. wearing one of the few dresses she'd brought that seemed remotely suitable for a frontier gathering. It was simpler than what she would have worn in Boston, but with its blue calico fabric and modest lace trim, she hoped it would strike the right balance between respectable and not too ostentatious. Cole arrived promptly at 11, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt beneath his usual vest. He'd even polished his boots, she noticed with a flutter of pleasure. He looked, there was no other word for it, handsome. "You look nice," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. "Thank you," Willow replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "So do you." The drive to town was pleasant, the June day warm but not uncomfortable. As they traveled, Cole pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area, and Willow found herself laughing more than she had in months. There was an ease between them now, a comfortable rapport that made her heart light. The church stood at the eastern edge of town, a white wooden structure with a modest steeple. Behind it, tables had been set up in the shade of ancient oak trees, laden with food brought by the congregation. Children played games in the open field nearby, their laughter carrying on the breeze. As Cole helped Willow down from the wagon, she felt curious eyes upon them. Clearly, their arrival together was causing some interest among the townspeople. "Prepare yourself," Cole murmured, offering his arm. "Martha Hollies will have told everyone you're coming. And now that we're here together, the speculation will be rampant." Willow slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, enjoying the solid feel of him beside her. "Let them speculate. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone." Martha descended upon them almost immediately, resplendent in her Sunday best, her face alight with pleasure. "You came," she exclaimed, embracing Willow. "And don't you look lovely?" She gave Cole an approving once-over. "Both of you, come, let me introduce you around." What followed was a whirlwind of introductions to the minister and his wife, to families whose names blurred together, to elderly pioneers who had known her uncle since his arrival decades ago. Everyone was welcoming, though Willow detected an undercurrent of curiosity, and from some, wariness. She was still an outsider, and it would take time to earn their trust. Throughout the introductions, Cole remained at her side, his presence reassuring. He spoke little, but when he did, it was clear the townspeople respected him. Even those who seemed intimidated by him acknowledged him with deference. As they filled plates with food and found seats at one of the long tables, Willow spotted Blake across the gathering. He was speaking with several well-dressed men, his manner commanding. When he noticed her watching, he raised his glass slightly in her direction, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Ignore him," Cole advised quietly. "This is your day to meet your neighbors, not worry about Blake." Willow took his advice, turning her attention to the elderly woman who had taken the seat opposite her, Mrs. Patterson, a widow whose family had been among the first settlers in the area. "Your uncle was a good neighbor," Mrs. Patterson said, her roomy eyes kind. "Always willing to help with heavy work, never asked for anything in return. Not like some." She glanced meaningfully in Blake's direction. "I'm hoping to continue that tradition," Willow replied, "though I have much to learn about frontier life." Mrs. Patterson's gaze shifted to Cole. "You've got a good teacher, from what I hear. Cole knows these lands almost as well as your uncle did." The conversation flowed easily after that, with Mrs. Patterson sharing stories of the early days of Clifton Hill, and offering practical advice about everything from preserving food to predicting weather from cloud patterns. Willow found herself genuinely enjoying the old woman's company and the sense of connection to the community's history. As the afternoon progressed, the gathering took on a festive atmosphere. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon couples were dancing in the open area near the oak trees. Willow watched, entranced by the simple joy of it. "Would you like to dance?" Cole's voice startled her from her reverie. She turned to find him standing beside her, hand extended. "I'd love to, but I don't know the steps." A rare, full smile transformed his face. "I'll teach you. It's not so different from your Eastern dances, just livelier." He led her to the makeshift dance floor and, true to his word, patiently guided her through the steps of a country reel. Willow was a quick study, and soon they were moving together with surprising grace, his hand firm at her waist, her laughter joining the music in the summer air. As they danced, Willow became aware of how natural it felt to be with Cole, how his touch steadied her, how his rare smiles warmed her from within. She had known this man less than a week, yet somehow it felt like much longer, as if some part of her had been waiting for him without knowing it. The dance ended, and they stood catching their breath, reluctant to break contact. In that moment, surrounded by the community yet somehow apart with him, Willow realized she was falling in love with Colton Blackwood, this complex, honorable man who had saved her life in more ways than one. The realization must have shown in her face, for Cole's expression softened, his eyes darkening with an emotion that made her breath catch. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a commotion near the church steps drew their attention. Marshall Jenkins, a weathered man with iron-gray hair and a star pinned to his vest, was arguing with one of Blake's ranch hands. Even from a distance, it was clear the conversation was heated. Cole tensed beside her, his hand instinctively moving toward his holstered gun. "Stay here," he instructed, guiding Willow toward Martha Holly's before striding toward the disturbance. Martha took Willow's arm, her expression concerned. "Trouble?" "I'm not sure," Willow replied, watching as Cole approached the marshal. The two men conferred briefly, then both looked in her direction. Cole nodded once, then made his way back to her. "We need to leave," he said quietly, his expression grave. "Now, what's happening?" Willow asked, alarmed by the urgency in his voice. "Jenkins just got word that someone broke into your cabin while we've been here. Nothing was taken, but—" He hesitated. "They tore the place apart, Willow. They were looking for something." Fear gripped her. "The box, keep your voice down," Cole warned, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "We don't know if they found it. Jenkins is heading out there now, and we need to go with him." Martha, overhearing this, squeezed Willow's hand. "Go, child. Thomas and I will explain your absence." They made their departure as unobtrusively as possible, though Willow was aware of Blake watching them from across the gathering, his expression calculating. Cole helped her into the wagon, then mounted his own horse, riding close beside her as they followed Marshall Jenkins out of town. The journey back to the homestead seemed interminable, with anxiety building with every mile. When they finally arrived, Willow gasped at the sight that greeted them. The cabin door hung askew on broken hinges, and even from outside, she could see the destruction within. Inside was worse than she'd imagined. Furniture had been overturned, her uncle's mattress slashed open, floorboards pried up in several places. The vandals had been thorough in their search. "Check the hiding place," Cole murmured as Jenkins examined the broken door. Willow made her way to the bedroom, her heart in her throat. The floorboard they'd loosened was back in place, seemingly untouched. Carefully, she pried it up and reached into the space beneath. The metal box was gone,